Hello world of YouTube and welcome to year-end list season. It's that time of the year where all the other bloggers and music critics are throwing their hats into their best of the year, yada yada of the year. And this old dog's coming back, bitch. I'm bringing out not only my best of the year, I'm doing this video, my worst of the year, and I'm gonna be doing my top films of the year for the first time ever. So, a lot of new things happening, a lot of firsts, and this year in general in music has brought forth a lot of disappointments. I could have made a top 11 disappointments list as well, but for time constraints, I decided against it. There was some good things, and I'll talk about those later, but I'm honestly a little surprised I didn't have more things to put on this worst of list, because I heard a lot of really shitty music this year, but I feel like part of me reached this point where I stopped looking for it, or I stopped finding it. Maybe I was just running out, because this year was bad. It was very bad, but lot of records that I didn't like, and without further ado, let's just dump into it. Let's dump into this shit. It's my top 11 worst of the year. Tech Nine needs to take a break from music. His record last year, The Storm, was okay, but it was just as bloated as his recent records have been. And it doesn't help that he's putting out 2 a year most years. This year was no exception, and he's just running out of things to talk about. He's making it harder to keeping himself interesting on the mic too. A lot of his flows are the same, a lot of his lyrical topics are the same, and it leaves all of his catalog to be very watered down. And while the 2 albums he put out this year were collabos projects, which are usually his excuse to dip into pop rap realms, he's also doing it on his main stage records as well. So I don't really know what the difference between the 2 is anymore, other than these are bad. And Strange Rain was the second to come out this year, and it's even worse because while Tech has the strongest roster he's had in years, even they are having issues keeping me interested throughout this entire thing's runtime. And I hate to say this, because you guys know, I like Tech 9. I genuinely enjoy Tech's music, but I just found this thing to be so much of the same from Tech. And that's not what I want. It's not what I found interesting about Tech 9 in the first place. And yeah, I didn't like this thing really at all. Outside of maybe a couple of verses from a couple of people, this thing ultimately just fails, in my opinion. One thing I did a lot of this year was look into bands that I haven't heard of in a while. I haven't looked into in years. And while that did also bring forth a lot of those mediocre disappointments, there were some real stinkers. And some of them, outside of this, are highlighted on this list. But Bush's latest Black and White Rainbows finds Bush stretching the ideas of reverby guitars and some electronic textures out incredibly thin. A lot of these songs sound so similar. Like the guitar tone is the same, the riffs almost sound the same, and I feel like this is the epitome of a band who should have stopped years ago, continuing to try. And, you know, normally I don't knock people for effort, but it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of effort put into this. Everybody in the band just sounds kind of bored. They're kind of meandering around on a lot of these songs. You'll hear me use these words a lot: bored, dull, meandering. And that's because a lot of these bad records aren't fundamentally bad. They're just dull. They are incredibly boring. They're so drab, it hurts. And Bush's latest record was another prime example of that. A record that just overstayed its welcome from track 3. And that's ultimately its biggest problem. Now, admittedly, this record is not the same type of bad I thought it was going to be, given the lead singles going up into it. With songs like Look What You Made Me Do, it paints this record as being this pandering, just trite piece of crap. While there are tracks like that, there's actually an overabundance of samey, dull, drawn out pop tunes. And one of the biggest issues I feel like with this record is, while I liked 1989, it was only lush when it needed to be. It had this nice mixture of lush backdrops with punchy forms of instrumentation, if you want to put that in quotes. Reputation is just filled with, while they do have punchy instrumentation, it's shrouded in mediocrity. There's a lot of those modern pop tropes that I don't think suit Taylor Swift that well. Another great thing about 1989 is its soundscape was well indebted to what it was trying to be, and Taylor's lyrical sheet was a nice mixture of self-awareness with appealability, broad appeal, relatability. And I feel like Taylor loses a lot of that relatability on here as well. This thing is just, it's not the Taylor record I was expecting following up 1989, even though it is the one I was expecting following the lead singles to some degree. I didn't think it'd be this boring, but lo and behold, she found a way to make herself dull. I've never been a big AFI fan. I never even really liked their popular stuff. Their vocalist kind of annoys me, and their overcompressed, which is ironic, soundscape never wrapped me in like it did some people. But this record is the complete opposite. This thing sounds like a bunch of rough demos. The mixing on this is atrocious. And even if they're trying to coin this as going back to our punkier roots, those records, their punkier roots, which admittedly are better than this, are mixed better. The fundamentals are better than they are here. The vocals on half of these songs are lost. The guitars are so flaccid. A lot of these things mixed are incredibly flaccid, and the songwriting does not lend itself to anything great either. It sounds very tired. I mean, even if I don't like a song like Miss Murder, it at least has some good lyric choices. You know what I mean? So, well, I didn't have high hopes going into this. I didn't think this would be this bad. I really wanted to like Flobots' latest record. I don't know why. I enjoy Fight with Tools still, and I think the follow-up to that wasn't bad either. Did I want to invest in anything else? No, but I felt like time spent in relative obscurity would pay off well for the Flobots. They would find a way to retool their sound in a way that was interesting to them. Their follow-up to Fight with Tools sounded very akin to Fight with Tools, and I felt like that might have been them trying to replicate that magic that was on their first record, and I would hope that years upon no one giving a shit, they would try to make something that suits them more. I guess I just had more faith in them than they did, because this thing sounds like the ideas in Fight with Tools, but even more dull, even more drawn out, even more boring. No one here sounds like they want to be here. And that's kind of a problem, because you aren't the band you used to be. You don't really have to play to larger crowds. You can make your sound more interesting. You can do things with your setup that are more engaging, that are more exciting. You can have that fervor that you did have on Fight with Tools as far as passion is concerned. And maybe it'll happen now that you're in a beef with Jake Paul, which is real, by the way. Which is terrifying to think about. But, yeah, you guys have the tools at your disposal to make something worthwhile, and I hope that this new stint in the public eye makes it better. I know a lot of people may have redacted a lot of their feelings about this record following the death of Chester Bennington, and I don't blame them. Some people were really harsh on this thing. If you guys missed the podcast where me and Mark talked about Chester Bennington's passing, we were pretty upfront about separating the tragedy from the art, which to some is hard to do. And in instances like Bowie's passing and Black Star, people align those together because the subject matter of Black Star is made even more poignant following Bowie's passing. This, regardless of if Chester lived or died, is still a band trying to do something and failing in its execution. They wanted to make an album that was more like something their kids would like, and as a result, They rely on a lot of these pop tropes, which nowadays are very dull and boring. A lot of pop this year has been very sad, and this thing tries to make this lush soundscape happy, which sounds interesting, but doesn't work when Chester sounds asleep on the mic, as does Mike Shinoda. It's sad that I don't like this thing, especially given that this is this band's final record. But I don't like this thing. I think that it's incredibly dull. I think that I need to find more words to describe boring, drab, and dull. It's very elongated, my experience of this. Some of the features are okay. Like, I like Pusha T. I don't think he really fits on a Linkin Park record, but he's a great rapper. There are elements of this that I do enjoy. There are some song textures that are okay. They're kind of like a spin on Living Things, which I think is an okay Linkin Park record. But by the by, this thing just doesn't hold my attention. I think it's very just monotonous. And I don't want that from Linkin Park. And it's sad that that's their last statement to make as a band. There are tracks here where Hopsin sounds like the best he has since Raw. But by the by, this thing is as shallow, is as juvenile as his last couple of records. And I kind of wasn't expecting that this time around, only because Hopsin has a lot to talk about. He has gone through a lot post Pound Syndrome. He split with his label, he split with his girlfriend, they have a kid together now. There's a lot going on in Hopsin's life that I felt that as a man in his 30s, he would use his platform to be a more meaningful rapper. But instead, he does things like slut shame. And I'm not trying to defend his ex because it sounds like a really shitty situation. I think that his music could be better put together. His happy ending track is just atrocious. It's bad. It's really bad. But hey, Witch Doctor's good. It's got a great beat. It's got a really good chorus. And I wish he did more stuff like that in Purge. Charge it to the game. Paint dripping like I'm whipping marmalade, bro. Look at the way that I'm shining. I don't be checking them. So we talked about this on the podcast, the latest Macklemore record. So if you want even more extended thoughts on that, go check the Matt's Odds podcast. Because we talked about it. And I didn't like it. I still don't like it. I think it's dumb that instead of trying to carve himself out as an artist, he decides to rely on his features to shape every song on this record. And if he's not using them to shape the sound of a song, he's instead playing this incredibly flaccid, atonal rapper who has nothing interesting to say. The instrumentals on this thing are very flat. The features do a better job than he does, and I say this not liking a lot of the features on this record. But shout out to Kesha, because you were still good on this thing, even if Macklemore wasn't. I checked this, like Flobots and a couple others in morbid curiosity. I haven't listened to Modest Yahoo in maybe 10 years. Nah, it's been less than that. It's been about 7 years. And I kind of hoped this would have been awesome for the same reason of Flobots. He's not been in the public eye for a while, so I had hoped he would have used this time to carve himself out as this really interesting, overlooked force in the underground rap reggae scene. And instead, he's writing 7-minute jams that put me to sleep. Nothing is very enticing about this. Nothing is appealing about this. Nothing about this is good. It's just drawn out song after drawn out song that has nothing of value to contribute to music. And it's really shitty. Third time to get bail and shit. Be a bum and start stealing shit. Fuck around and die and go to hell and shit, yo. I don't wanna be jobless. I feel bad for putting this so high on this list because it was something my friend was really interested in me checking out, and I didn't like this thing, and I really don't like Joyner Lucas. I was introduced to Joyner Lucas on Tech Nine's The Storm on the song Sriracha, and even some of his flaws as a rapper showed on that song, and those flaws are expanded upon and enhanced, magnified is the word I was looking for, on this debut album mixtape. And one of them is that he does not get some of the fundamentals of rapping down. Meaning, he doesn't keep the measure. Which I know sounds like a really harsh nitpick to make, but when you rap, and I'm saying this as someone who raps, you guys know this, it's distracting when you're listening to a song and the guy is slipping off the measure so vehemently. And it doesn't help that his lyrical topics are all the same real rap, bro-centric hip-hop that I'm tired of. I'm so tired of it. I know I used to like stuff like Crooked Eye and Slaughterhouse and Tech Nine, but all those guys just bore me now because I have found real rap, and it's not these guys. These guys are this homogenized example of hip-hop. And I apologize, by the way, throughout this entire video. It's being very congested. It's been something I'm battling for the past week or so. But back to the point. Joyner Lucas encapsulates everything that I am tired of hearing about in hip-hop. So you guys know, I fucking listened to this thing on a live stream for you guys, and I've been meaning to re-upload that onto Vimeo, so that way you guys can experience what I experienced if you weren't there. But Chris Brown's Heartbreak in a Full Mood did not need to happen. It did not need to exist. Chris Brown did not need to make a 2.5-hour long record wherein he rips off other dancehall tracks, he borrows Michael Jackson choruses. Nothing about this project screams ambition. It is the equivalent of a passion project about a guy I don't give a shit about. Chris Brown tries to play the victim on this thing on more than one occasion before showcasing why he's not the victim on the following song. I cannot stand this thing. I will never listen to it again, and I hope that no one else does, unless you watch the live stream and watch me suffer and break it down bit by bit for 5 hours. But that's my list of my top 11 least favorite records of the year. If you'd like to see my top 25, I have it linked in the description in a list on Rate Your Music. Other things that have been on there, that have made it on there, Drake's More Life, Poppy's Poppy Computer, Royal Blood's How Did We Get So Dark, and Seth MacFarlane's In Full Swing. But either way, if you'd like to see what I have to say about those, it's linked down in the description. Next week, I'm going to be having my top 10 or top 11 films of the year. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I have been ViralRak. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you next week.